Hiya Year 6 and welcome to our final week of home learning, and it's a really big push this week to finish our learning journey, and we're going to try and finish our class read The Hobbit, and then when you come back we can start a new book. So we're going to be doing lots of reading and lots of work this week, and it's our big last push until we're all back in school together again. The afternoon was turning into evening when he came out again and stumbled and fell in a faint on the doorstep. The dwarves revived him and doctored his scorches as well as they could, but it was a long time before the hair on the back of his heel and on his head grew properly again. It had all been singed and frizzled right down to the skin. In the meanwhile, his friends did their best to cheer him up, and they were eager for his story, especially wanting to know why the dragon had made such an awful noise and how Bilbo had escaped. But the hobbit was worried and uncomfortable, and they had difficulty in getting anything out of him. On thinking things over, he was now regretting some of the things he had said to the dragon, and was not eager to repeat them. The old thrush was sitting on a rock nearby with his head cocked on one side, listening to all that was said. It shows what an ill temper Bilbo was in. He picked up a stone and threw it at the thrush, which merely fluttered aside and came back. "Drat the bird," said Bilbo crossly. "I believe he's listening, and I don't like the look of him." "Leave him alone," said Thorin. "The thrushes are good and friendly. This is a very old bird indeed, and is maybe the last left of the ancient breed that used to live about here, tamed to the hands of my father and grandfather. They were a long-lived and magical race, and this might be one of those that were alive then, a couple of hundred of years or more ago. The men of Dale used to have the trick of understanding their language, and used them for messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere. Well, he'll have news to take to Lake Town, all right, if that is what he's after," said Bilbo, "though I don't suppose there are any people left there that trouble with thrush language." Why, what has happened?" cried the dwarfs. "Do get on with your tale." So Bilbo told them all he could remember, and he confessed that he had had a nasty feeling that the dragon guessed too much from his riddles added to the camps and the ponies. "I'm sure he knows we came from Lake Town and had help from there, and I have a horrible feeling that his next move may be in that direction. I wish to goodness I'd never said that about Barrel Rider. It would have even made a blind rabbit in these parts think of the lake men. Well, well, it can't be helped, and if it's difficult not to slip in talking to a dragon, or so I've always heard," said Balin, anxious to comfort him. "I think you did very well, if you ask me. You found out one useful thing at any rate, and got home alive, and that is more than most can say when they have had words with the likes of Smaug. It may be a mercy and a blessing yet to know of the bare patch in the old worm's diamond waistcoat." That turned the conversation, and they all began discussing dragon slayings, historical, dubious, and mythical, and the various sort of stabs and jabs and undercuts, and the different arts, devices, and stratagems by which they had been accomplished. The general opinion was that catching a dragon napping was not as easy as it sounded, and the attempt to stick one or prod one asleep was more likely to end in disaster than a bold frontal attack. All the while they talked, the thrush listened, till at last, when the stars began to peep forth, it silently spread its wings and flew away. And all the while they talked and the shadows lengthened, Bilbo became more and more unhappy, and his foreboding grew. At last he interrupted them. "I'm sure we are very unsafe here," he said, "and I don't see the point of sitting here. The dragon has withered all the pleasant green, and anyway the night has come and it is cold. But I feel it in my bones that this place will be attacked again. Smaug knows now how I came down to the hall, and you can trust him to guess where the other end of the tunnel is. He will break all this side of the mountain to bits, if necessary, to stop up our entrance, and if we are smashed with it, the better he will like it." "You are very gloomy, Mr. Baggins," said Thorin. "Why has not Smaug blocked the lower end, then, if he's so eager to keep us out? He has not, or we would have heard him." I don't know, because at first he wanted to try and lure me in again, I suppose, and now perhaps because he is waiting till after tonight's hunt, or because he does not want to damage his bedroom if he can help it. But I wish you would not argue. Smaug will be coming out at any minute now, and our only hope is to get well in the tunnel and shut the door." He seemed so much in earnest that the dwarves at last did what he said. They delayed shutting the door. It seemed a desperate plan, but no one knew whether or how they could get it open again from the inside, and the thought of being shut in a place from which the only way out led through the dragon's lair was not one they liked. Also, everything seemed quite quiet, both outside and down the tunnel. So for a longish while they sat inside, not far down from the half-open door, and went on talking. The talk turned to the dragon's wicked words about the dwarves. Bilbo wished he had never heard them, or at least that he could feel quite certain that the dwarves were absolutely honest when they declared that they had never thought at all about what happened after the treasure had been won. "We knew it would be a desperate venture," said Thorin, "and we know it still, and I still think that when we have won it will be time enough to think about what to do with it. As for your share, Mr. Baggins, I assure you that we are more than grateful, and you shall choose your own 14th as soon as we have anything to divide. I'm sorry if you are worried about transport, and I admit the difficulties are great. The lands have not become less wild with the passing of time, rather the reverse. But we will do whatever we can for you, and take our share of the cost when the time comes. Believe me or not, as you like." From that the talk turned to the great hoard itself, and to the things that Thorin and Balin remembered. They wondered if they were still lying there unharmed in the hall below, the spears that were made for armies of the great King Bladorthin, long since dead. Each had a thrice forged head, and their shafts were inlaid with cunning gold, but they were never delivered or paid for. Shields made for the warriors long dead, the great golden cup of Thrall, two-handed, hammered and carven with birds and flowers, whose eyes and petals were of jewels, coats of mail gilded and silvered and impenetrable, the necklace of Girion, Lord of Dale, made of 500 emeralds green as grass, which he gave for the arming of his eldest son in a coat of dwarf-linked rings, the like of which had never been made before, for it was wrought of pure silver to the power and strength of triple steel. But fairest of all was the great white gem, which the dwarves had found beneath the roots of the mountain, the heart of the mountain, the Arkenstone of Thrain. "The Arkenstone, the Arkenstone," murmured Thorin in the dark, half dreaming with his chin upon his knees. It was like a globe with 1,000 faces. It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon. But the enchanted desire of the hoard had fallen from Bilbo. All through their talk he was only half listening to them. He sat nearest to the door with one ear cocked for any beginnings of a sound without. His other was alert for echoes beyond the murmurs of the dwarf, for any whisper of a movement from far below. Darkness grew deeper, and he grew ever more uneasy. "Shut the door," he begged them. "I fear that dragon in my marrow. I like this silence far less than the uproar of last night. Shut the door before it's too late." Something in his voice gave the dwarves an uncomfortable feeling. Slowly Thorin shook off his dreams, and getting up, he kicked away the stone that wedged the door. Then they thrust upon it, and it closed with a snap and a clang. No trace of a keyhole was there left on the inside. They were shut in the mountain. And not a moment too soon. They had hardly gone any distance down the tunnel when a blow smote the side of the mountain like a crash of battering rams made of forest oaks and swung by a giant. The rock boomed, the walls cracked, and stones fell from the roof on their heads. What would have happened if the door had still been open? I don't like to think. They fled further down the tunnel, glad to still be alive, while beyond them outside they heard the roar and rumble of Smaug's fury. He was breaking rocks to pieces, smashing wall and cliff with the lashing of his huge tail, till their little lofty camping ground, the scorched grass, the thrush's stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, and all disappeared in a jumble of smithereens, and an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff into the valley below. Smaug had left his lair in silent stealth, quietly soared into the air, and then floated heavy and slow in the dark like a monstrous crow, down the wind towards the west of the mountain, in the hopes of catching unawares something or somebody there, and of spying the outlet to the passage which the thief had used. This was the outburst of his wrath when he could find nobody and see nothing, even where he guessed the outlet must actually be. After he had let off his rage in this way, he felt better, and he thought in his heart that he would not be troubled again from that direction. In the meanwhile, he had further vengeance to take. "Barrel rider," he snorted, "your feet came from the waterside, and up the water you come without a doubt. I don't know your smell, but if you're not one of those men of the lake, you had their help. They shall see me and remember who's the real king under the mountain. He rose in fire and went away south towards the running river. Okay, and we've moved on now to chapter 13, which says not at home, which might give you some clue to what it's going to be about. But what we need to do now is we need to go away and we need to complete the comprehension questions on the chapter we have just read. So go away now and let's complete the comprehension questions on the chapter we've just read.